easy go.
Good evening and welcome to the Chapo Show with Jerónimo Guzmán and Santiago Castillo. Today we will talk about the wonderful book An Inspector Calls by J.B. Priestley. J.B. Priestley was an English author who was born in 1894. He fought in the First World War in the British Army, and this play debuted in 1945 in the context of the Second World War. He experienced both wars, the first one from his own perspective, and the second one from an outside perspective of the situation. This could have influenced his writing and the way he saw the world. This play is about a rich family that is celebrating the marriage of the daughter when an inspector comes to the house to investigate the suicide of someone called Eva Smith. As the plot develops, we see that every member of the family in some way influenced on Eva's suicide in representation of the high classes abusing their power and taking advantage from the lower ones in the 20th century in England. Now I will talk about an extract from the book from Act 3 of the play. In this extract, we see the members of the Berling family after all of them have been exposed, and the inspector leaves with a final reflection. The main conflict in this extract is the guilt of some characters and the final moral destruction of what in the beginning seemed like a perfect family, leaving clear that it was actually all the way around. The Berlings are presented as an upper-class, rich family that is well-structured, very wealthy, and with a promising future. Now that Sheila is engaged with the son of the owner of an important company. Though this does not last much, since the inspector explains how each member of the family indirectly killed someone. Some themes that are evidenced here in this extract and in the whole play are social responsibility and class.
I would like to talk about those themes you pointed out because it seemed interesting. First, social responsibility. Social responsibility is being conscious of our position in society and taking responsibility of it. With this, each person in society acts in benefit of the whole society, thinking in a community level and not a personal level. I think that the Berlings at the beginning do not stand by this, but as the play progresses, characters like Eric and Sheila understand that this value and that the actions that they take from the position in society have a huge impact. In the extract, Eric says that he will never forget this, and Sheila feels guilty of what she did to Ava. Both admit their acts and feel responsible of them. This doesn't happen with Mrs. and Mr. Berling, since they struggle to admit what they did and prioritize themselves and their family over what happened to Ava. What do you think about this?
I think that at the end, the theme of social responsibility in this play was, I think, not meant specifically for the characters, but it was mainly directed to the reader. And J.B. Priestley wanted his audience to be responsible of their own behavior and for the welfare of the others.
Yes, I agree. The other themes of the extract I would like to talk about is class, which is probably the main theme in this play, if you ask me. In the context of production of this play in England, the social classes were very divided. This was something that came from the times of the Industrial Revolution, which is on the upper class in a much higher level than the working class. The author shows these theme by the contrast between Ava and the Berlin family, one from the working class and the others from the high and wealthy class. We know that Ava, through the story, got involved with the Berlins in many situations, and in each one of them, she was considered inferior and thus left behind, just for being from a low class. Ava is constantly getting affected by the fact that she is from the working class. She is a worker at a factory, but she loses her job and then works at a shop. But she also loses her job because Sheila wanted to. Then she loses her money and can't afford having a baby, being evicted from Mrs. Berlin Woman Charity. And about this theme, why do you think that the author used it in the play?
Now that you say this, I think that this might be a representation of our own society. The Berling family represents the rich class that only think about themselves and their own benefit, and Eva represents the lower classes that must struggle to succeed but at the end can't. Priestley probably wanted to show this in his play, representing um, the whole society and their classes with the Berlings and Eva. Now we're going to discuss some IB themes that are related to this play. Can you tell us one of these while also referring to the book?
Yes, I would like to talk about experiences and identity. We can see the theme in the book about Ava and her relationship with the Berlin family. I think that their identities are very marked and different. The Berlins are a rich family with everything in life and all resources just because they were born in that family, while Ava wasn't that lucky and had to work hard to succeed. But at the end, she couldn't because the Berlin identity was superior than hers.
I agree with this because I think that these identities of them determined what ended up happening to Eva. But I also think that identities can be shaped and influenced with different experiences, which is also an IB theme. For example, Sheila first was a very selfish person who only cared about herself. She was insecure, jealous, and immature. This is what made her fire Eva from her job. But then, when she learns that Eva committed suicide because of this, and that she didn't consider her position, she realizes that what she did was awful, and that Eva didn't deserve it. With this experience, I think she changed her identity and the way she sees other people.
You are right, and I also think that we can also see this with Eric in a similar way as Sheila, and also with Ava, but in another way. Ava, as I said before, worked hard to succeed and tried her best. Every time something happened to her because of a bullying, she looked for another way. But when this gets worse and worse, she couldn't succeed, even though she tried everything. And when finally Mrs. Burling doesn't approve the help she needed in order to have the baby, there was nothing else she could have done and committed suicide. These experiences she had with the Burlings shaped her identity, making her from a hard worker to someone who didn't have the strength to keep living.
And moving to another theme, what do you and the theme about sharing the world? Do you think that this theme is in this play?
Yes, I definitely think that. This has to do also with social responsibility, which we talked about before. In the play, we see that the Burlings aren't conscious of their acts and only care about themselves and their profit. But then, for example, Sheila and Eric realize that their actions have consequences, that they are not alone in this world, and that they should think about the others, since they live in the same society and should be considerate of what they do, trying not to affect others.
What you say is true, but I also would like to point out that Mr. and Mrs. Berling always tried to maintain their status and didn't learn the lesson. as as Eric and Sheila did. I think that the author did this to show how maybe older people are more difficult to change since they have been living their entire life with an idea on their heads. And that's why Mr. and Mrs. Berling never considered Eva's position, while Eric and Sheila changed their points of view. As a last topic to discuss, I would like you I would like to ask you if you can think of any ways that these IB themes can be related to the current global events or issues, also considering an inspector calls.
The themes of identities can be related to our society nowadays. As many probably know, last year there was a movement called Black Lives Matters, where people through protest wanted more equality between black and white people. The identity of black people is not at any capacity inferior to the white identity. And I think that this social movement in parts of the world, and especially in the United States, made black people feel proud of who they are and their identity. In the book, we see this differentiation with social class, as we talked about before, rather than race, but it is still relevant. We can link this to the Black Lives Matter movement in the way that in both cases we see an abuse of power, and in both with experiences. The manifestations and what happened to Ava, the identities can change. And the other theme, sharing the world, is there any way you think we can relate the play with our world?
Yes, yes, I think we can relate it to our current situation, the global pandemic of the coronavirus, because in this context we need we need to be conscious of what we do to don't spread the virus. Um, the actions that we take can directly affect many people. If we don't use mask or don't stay at home during quarantine, don't vaccinate, etc., we might be exposing many people and spread COVID to them. We should be aware of this and understand that we are not alone in the world, and that the actions that we take and the ones that we don't can cause bad things to others. Exactly the same as what happened to Eva because of what the Berlings did.
What you said made me think about something that also shows a relationship between the book and the pandemic. I thought that in both cases, what we do can also affect ourselves and our family. For example, if we don't wear a mask or don't take of ourselves with the virus, we might spread it to someone, and this person to another, and it might end up in someone from our family, like a grandmother, which probably won't be able to survive, and we, without knowing, could be condemning her life. This also happens in the play, but the other way around, when Mrs. Berling rejects Ava, and then Ava isn't able to have her baby and ends up committing suicide. And the baby also dies. What Mrs. Berling didn't know was that the baby was her grandson, and in some way she condemned his life. Do you have any final reflections about what we've been talking about during this program?
Yes, I think I do. I think that this play gives a lot to talk about, and also we can learn a lot of things that are presented in J.B. Priestley's work. His message with this play was that we as a society should be more cautious of what we do, because not everyone is in our same position than our and that our actions have consequences that we might not be aware of.
And this play also represents issues that we have nowadays. As we talked about, many current things that are happening right now in our society are also happening in the book. Themes as identities, experiences, and sharing the world are very relevant today in our lives. And they also maybe will still be relevant in the future, but we can't be sure about that.
Yes, but hopefully many of those issues can be resolved so we can live together as a society that cares about others and is conscious of their actions. Thank you. It was a pleasure to have you in this show, and I hope that our audience liked it.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
opinions.